You know, usually when we think about the creation of a monster, there's this expectation of a sudden explosive moment.
Right, like a lightning strike in a laboratory.
Exactly, like a single drop of a glowing chemical, a definitive before and after.
And it's very theatrical. It happens in an instant.
Yeah.
The mad scientist pulls a lever, the lightning flashes, and the creature just opens its eyes.
It's clean. If you step into the world of long-term behavioral trauma, that lightning strike is replaced by a really slow, terrifying psychological erosion.
Yeah, much more insidious.
Today, we are tracking a 100-plus-year collapse of a human mind. We are decoding the real-world forensic psychology of Marcel, the founder of the Dread Doctors.
Such a fascinating case study.
It really is. And we're taking the canon straight from the official Teen Wolf Wiki, specifically as it was so brilliantly deconstructed by Paul from Teen Wolf News. And we're using his analysis to look at the clinical pathology beneath the sci-fi horror. So welcome to this deep dive. We're glad you're here.
It's a great approach, really, because looking closely at those supernatural elements reveals a very grounded, very real behavioral breakdown. I mean, the monster isn't born from a lightning strike. It's born from a century of psychological decay.
We have to look at 18th century Marcel, before the masks, before all the science.
Just the man.
Just the man. He was a high-functioning enabler, a bar owner, a military soldier. But beneath that, he was suffering from obsessive love disorder, or OLD.
Which is incredibly destructive.
Totally. He had this unrequited, consuming obsession with the serial killer Sebastian Vallee, also known as Lebet. Marcel experienced total de-individuation.
Right.
His entire identity, his morals, his ego, they were just completely swallowed up by Sebastian.
And that concept of de-individuation is crucial here. In clinical psychology, obsessive love disorder drives an individual to protect and possess someone else at the complete expense of their own selfhood.
Right, they just disappear.
Exactly.
Go ahead. Do it, Marie-Jean. Release it, Marie-Jean. Please.
It sounds like he's just a willing accomplice, but Paul's analysis points out something totally different.
Oh, absolutely.
Marcel was trapped in what's called an ego-dystonic cycle.
Yes.
He was exhausted, terrified. He couldn't say no to Sebastian face to face, so his brain created this backdoor escape route through subconscious sabotage.
Just self-sabotage is key.
He started leaving Sebastian's victims where his own sister would find them. It wasn't a sloppy mistake. It was a psychological cry for help.
Because ego-dystonic means your actions are in direct conflict with your own baseline sanity.
Right.
He was paralyzed by the obsession, so he subconsciously lowered his guard, basically begging the outside world to step in and stop the monster, that he lacks the power to fight himself. I mean, he wanted to be caught.
He wanted to be caught.
Do you have any cloth? Something to wrap your hand?
Yes, in the cellar.
And I have to point out, this is exactly where almost every true crime story ends.
With the arrest.
Yeah, the enabler subconsciously slips up, authorities step in, the monster is caught, and the enabler goes to prison. The nightmare ends because they finally get caught.
But not here.
No, for Marcel, this was just the prologue. Because Sebastian actually gets killed and Marcel survives. The enabler outlives the monster,
Leaving a massive psychological vacuum. The object of his obsession is gone, but the obsession itself remains completely intact.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where our deep dive really begins. What happens when an obsessed enabler survives his monster's death, stops crying for help, and turns to a century of sci-fi horror?
It's a dark pivot.
Because Marcel didn't process his grief, he weaponized it.
He absolutely weaponized it.
Yeah.
Product of genius and madness. Two traits too often found in the same mind. The man who created the first was known only as the surgeon. He harnessed electromagnetic fields in the masks, infusing them with a unique and deadly power.
We see this massive chronological shift into the fringes of pseudoscience.
Yeah.
Marcel moves from being a stressed, exhausted bartender and soldier to building his steampunk suit, hiding his face entirely, prolonging his own life, and learning to harness electromagnetic forces.
Ooh.
It is a radical psychological defense mechanism.
Let's really dig into that defense mechanism, because he goes from sneaking around, cleaning up blood, to actively operating on teenagers, on these natural chimeras, burying them in holes in the ground, and coldly monitoring the results.
It's a staggering escalation. Well, the clinical term for what he's employing here is intellectualization.
Okay.
In behavioral science, intellectualization is a defense mechanism where a person blocks out heavy emotional pain or massive guilt by turning the problem into a cold, abstract puzzle.
Ah, making it clinical.
Exactly. Marcel could not handle the crushing weight of his human grief. The guilt of the horrors he had already enabled for Sebastian would have absolutely destroyed him. So he built a literal and figurative shield. The mask is a physical barrier between his remaining humanity and the atrocities he is committing. By becoming a dread doctor, a nameless, faceless scientist, he doesn't have to be Marcel anymore.
Right.
Marcel's the one who feels pain. The dread doctor just collects data.
It's a total escape from emotional reality. And for you listening, I want you to consider how often that happens in the real world, just on an everyday level.
All the time.
How often do people use the work or the process or a rigid checklist to hide from their own emotional reality?
Yes, exactly.
Marcel just took that deeply human coping mechanism and stretched it over a century of sci-fi horror.
And that 100-year stretch explains how the atrocities became so routine for him.
He translates horrific trauma into a biological checklist. He stops feeling and starts measuring.
Look at the methodology. He is seeking out natural chimeras individuals who have two distinct sets of DNA.
Right.
Genetically, their bodies are already accustomed to harboring another. Marcel needs a body that won't reject a foreign entity because his ultimate goal is to implant the essence, the DNA, and the memories of Sebastian into a new host.
But then he performs these horrific surgeries and buries them in holes. Tell me about the holes. Why bury them alive?
Right, so it acts as an incubator in an extreme sensory deprivation chamber.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you were going to rewrite a human being's cellular structure and introduce a supernatural mutation, the physical shock is immense. But the psychological shock is even greater.
I can't even imagine.
By burying them underground, he deprives the brain of all external stimuli. No light, no sound, no spatial awareness.
Total isolation.
It forces the mind to break down, minimizing psychological resistance so the body can accept the physical changes. He is breaking them down to their absolute baseline components. It is a calculated erasure of the self. When you strip away the humanity of your subjects, burying teenagers in sensory deprivation holes just becomes another data point in a long-term study. A failed experiment isn't lost life, it's just a variable that needs adjusting.
So he's successfully numbed his guilt. But a clinical process is only as good as its results. And his early results, spanning decades, were absolute disasters.
Complete failures.
Marcel didn't just stay stagnant as a clinical machine, he was constantly iterating. Paul from Teen Wolf News provides analysis of how Marcel's targets shifted over time, specifically looking at his first major attempt, Theo Rakin.
Yes. For decades, Marcel's strategy was engineered malice. He was trying to build a perfect villain from the ground up.
Because Sebastian was evil.
Exactly. He thought Sebastian was a monster, so I need to build a monster.
Yeah.
He chose Theo because Theo already exhibited profound psychopathic traits. Marcel assumed that a foundation of pure selfishness and a total lack of empathy would be the perfect breeding ground for the beast.
He tried to manufacture evil, but Theo failed spectacularly as a vessel.
Theo Rakin. Failure. Theo Rakin.
No, I'm not a failure.
Not a complete failure. We learned from you. You have the entitlement and narcissism typical of your generation, in that you are a profound success.
The problem with engineering a pure narcissist like Theo is that they only serve themselves.
Right.
A narcissist's ego is too rigid, too self-serving. Theo wasn't interested in being a vessel for someone else. Theo was only interested in Theo's own power.
That makes total sense.
Marcel realized you can't pour Sebastian's soul into a cup that is already overflowing with self-obsession. The host rejects the parasite.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when the psychopathy route failed, Marcel had a chilling cognitive breakthrough.
It's so dark.
A century of isolated obsession had completely warped his moral compass.
We believed that to resurrect the perfect killer, we had to start with the perfect evil.
From you, we learned true evil only comes by corrupting something truly good.
Which leads him directly to his final vessel, Mason Hewitt.
Right. And Mason is the absolute purest light he could find in the world. He's incredibly loyal, kind, and entirely innocent.
The exact opposite of Theo.
Exactly. To pull his specific light, which is Sebastian, the love of his life, out of the darkness, Marcel was perfectly willing to extinguish an innocent kid. So I have to ask, does this mean Marcel no longer understood what evil actually was? Or did he just stop caring about the cost?
I would argue it goes even deeper than just not caring about the cost.
Yeah.
His definition of value had completely collapsed. You spend 100 years intellectualizing your actions, concepts like innocence and evil lose their moral weight. They just become variables in an equation.
Just data points again.
Exactly. Mason's innocence is a highly volatile, potent energy source in this pseudoscientific framework. Marcel had exhausted the psychopathy avenue. Corrupting innocence was a breakthrough in chemistry for him, not a moral failing.
That is so messed up.
The tragedy of erasing Mason was completely irrelevant to the Dread Doctor.
That is terrifying because it means he is completely disconnected from the reality of what he is doing. He is entirely goal-oriented.
Goal-oriented to a fault. But securing the physical vessel, this corrupted innocence in Mason, still isn't enough. A physical body alone doesn't bring Sebastian back.
Right. And this is where the sci-fi elements perfectly mirror the psychological reality. Marcel has to recreate the mind of the beast. We move from the biological to the neurological.
He utilizes electromagnetic frequencies to manipulate memories. He is effectively forcing the new beast to remember its past life as Sebastian Vallet. So he is targeting the hippocampus, the brain's memory center. Our brains operate on electrical impulses.
Okay.
By using specific, highly calibrated electromagnetic frequencies, Marcel is literally rewriting Mason's neural pathways.
It's forced neurological reincarnation, but why? Why force the memories? Why not just let the beast be a mindless engine of destruction? I mean, if he just wanted a monster, he had one.
This wasn't just about making a monster. This was about the paradox of memory. Marcel's obsession, his entire century of gruesome work, required validation.
Validation.
Yes. If he just created a generic, mindless werewolf running around that didn't know who it was, his century of sacrifice meant absolutely nothing.
He needed the resurrected Sebastian to know who he was, and more importantly, to know who Marcel was.
Exactly.
The obsession demanded recognition. He's using electromagnetic frequencies not just for science, but to literally force the object of his affection to remember him. He wants Sebastian to wake up, look at him, and say, "Thank you, you saved me."
The ultimate payoff.
Yes. He wants the love he never got the first time around in the 18th century. It's the ultimate desperate act of a man who has erased himself for someone else. The science is just a cry for love.
Okay, that's a fair distinction. The intellectualization was a shield, but you're right, it didn't cure the core pathology.
Right.
The obsessive love disorder was still the engine driving the machine. The desperation highlights why this is such a profound psychological study. Marcel couldn't cure his obsession, so he tried to cure reality instead.
He tried to cure reality.
He tried to force the universe to give him the reunion he felt he was owed.
And the century-long experiment finally peaks. Marcel successfully pushes past all his human limits to finish the task. The electromagnetic memory manipulation works.
It actually does.
The vessel is corrupted, the neural pathways are rewritten, the resurrection actually works. Sebastian Vallet is back.
The 100-year thesis is proven correct.
It is.
Yeah.
But that brings us to this incredibly bloody, tragic irony.
For you. All for you.
Marcel, this is what immortality looks like. I think you might have been misled.
He seamlessly murders Marcel.
Just kills him.
He just kills him.
What Paul's analysis reveals here is the brutal reality of malignant dependency. In a relationship built on malignant dependency, the enabler entirely hollows themselves out to serve the predator. Marcel systematically erased his own humanity so his feelings wouldn't get in the way of the task. He became a tool.
Right.
But the tragedy is, when you turn yourself into a tool, you shouldn't be surprised when you were treated like one.
The monster just saw a hammer that had finished driving the nail.
Exactly. Once a tool has served its purpose, you discard it. Sebastian didn't feel gratitude, because predators don't feel gratitude toward their enablers. They only feel entitlement.
Entitlement. Wow.
Marcel waited a century for a thank you from a creature incapable of giving one.
So, what does this all mean? We have tracked this incredible journey from an exhausted 18th century bartender, desperately leaving bodies out as a cry for help, to a hollowed-out dread doctor hiding behind steampunk masks and pseudoscience.
Quite the evolution.
He intellectualized the torture of teenagers and corrupted pure innocence, all for a man who killed him the second he was no longer useful. It is a stunning depiction of how an obsession can survive long after the human being attached to it is gone.
Marcel wasn't a cackling cartoon villain who loved evil for the sake of it. He was just a man who let his own identity be eclipsed by someone else's darkness.
Yeah.
But the ultimate takeaway of malignant dependency isn't just that the monster discards you. It's that, over a century, Marcel successfully recreated Sebastian so perfectly that Sebastian did exactly what he does best. He killed.
Right.
Marcel's experiment was a flawless success, and that success was his death sentence.
When we dedicate our entire identity to saving or enabling someone else, at what point do we stop being a person and simply become an instrument in their destruction?
A haunting thought.
Because the true horror of Marcel isn't the supernatural science. It's how entirely he erased himself, long before the monster finally struck the killing blow.